let's get into the giant mailbag.
What crazy thing did City do this week?
It's time for Mattress Running the Numbers. Ready for the main event?
The main event.
Frequent Miler on the air starts now. How far can you go with 3 credit card sign-up bonuses? That's what we're going to get into on today's show, because we just finished our 3 cards, 3 continents challenge, where the 3 of us, me, Nick, and Steven, all had exactly that to do, to figure out how big of a trip could we build with 3 credit card sign-up bonuses. So,
and I think we decisively answered pretty big, like pretty far.
Yes,
right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And for instead of the giant mailbag, we're going to just take a little step back to kind of shine the light on that. It is pretty incredible what can be done with just 3 credit card sign-up bonuses. I mean, we'll get into some details later on the show, but the fact is, all 3 of us built trips that a lot of people would never do in their whole lifetime, and we were able to do. Each one of us were able to do these incredible trips with just 3 credit card sign-up bonuses, which makes me so grateful to be in this hobby. The points and miles stuff is just so great, and that's why we do what we do, and gives us the ability to earn points easily, because of a lot of it is because of these credit card companies want us to sign up, so they basically bribe us to sign up by giving us huge amounts of points. And then the other side of the hobby is where we learn how to make the most out of those points. And, if you know what you're doing, you can go really, really far and do some incredible things. So,
yeah, and I think the thing that, like, for instance, and we'll get more into more detail later, but my trip was really fast paced and I went to a lot of places for a short time. But part of the thing that makes that acceptable to me is the knowledge that I can go back to all of those places, because we did this with just 3 credit cards, and there's so many out there that I know that at any given time I can easily put the points together to go to any one of those places that I want to again. And that's something that wouldn't be accessible for me otherwise. And I think for most people, would be like, okay, the pyramids of Egypt, maybe I'll do that once in my life. Whereas I know that if I decide I want to go back and do that again, I could do that one time any given year with just a little bit of strategy. And so I think that's what kind of made these trips so exciting, that we did some wild and crazy stuff and showed what you can do with very little. I mean, that's 3 cards is not an extreme amount, of cards or points.
right.
So it just makes the whole world accessible.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm very proud of all 3 of our trips. And by the time this show drops, we will have announced the winner. We let our readers and viewers vote for who they thought had the best trip. And so we'll know then that if early polling is correct, that Nick took away the championship this time. So
we'll see, but you can check the blog, because the results should be on the blog like about when this publishes. So if you're listening to this soon afterwards,
sure
you'll find it.
Yep. Okay, we're going to move into some regular segments now. First is What Crazy Thing, which is brought to you this week entirely by Marriott. We've got a double header.
Things has Marriott done
what
this
crazy
week?
Things. So first of all, Marriott introduced 2 new cards, the Bevy and Bountiful, and we've made fun of their B naming convention before. So that's not the crazy thing, although it is crazy. But why don't you tell us why this is so crazy that they introduced these 2 new cards?
It just makes absolutely no sense to me. So the 2 new cards are mid-tier cards. And by that, I mean they have a $250 annual fee, which places them squarely between the long-standing $95-ish cards that exist in the market with all the various co-brands, or the old Marriott cards, for instance, and the luxury sort of cards. The previous luxury card annual fee was $450. Now that's gone up to $650. But anyway, at any rate, so this $250 annual fee puts them in the middle somewhere, right? So you might think that they've got sort of a middle tier set of benefits, but when you look at them, it doesn't feel that way by any stretch of the imagination. Whereas the $95 a year card, the base level cards from, well, the base level card from Chase, and there's still an Amex one for those who've downgraded to it. Those cards come with an annual free night certificate, but these new $250 cards that cost $155 a year more don't come with an annual free night certificate, which just boggles the mind. That's a pretty standard benefit on hotel credit cards. So
right. So you have
nuts.
to spend, what is it, $15,000, I think. Is that right?
Right. $15,000. Yep.
To earn a 50K free night. So anyway, we'll get into whether that's worth doing. The next crazy thing is a good thing for those of us who have the old Ritz-Carlton credit card. What happened there?
Well, so the Ritz card really bumped up in value big time, because the Ritz card is now getting, it used to get an annual free night certificate worth up to 50,000 points. So you get a single night of up to 50,000 points. But they've increased that. So now your next annual free night certificate will be valid for a property up to 85,000 points, which really brings into the fold tons of great Marriott properties that would ordinarily cost a lot of money. And the thing is, they did not increase the annual fee at all. So for the same price you've been paying for your Ritz card that presumably you already found worthwhile for the 50K free night certificate and the card's other associated benefits, you're now going to get a much better 85K free night certificate. So that card's value just skyrocketed. For anybody who already had it, you have to be delighted, right, that you're getting more for the same price. And for anybody who was ever thinking about getting the card, I feel like it's become a no-brainer. And I say getting the card, but you can't get it new. You can't apply for it. You'd have to have another Chase consumer Marriott card that's been open for at least a year. And then you should be able to call Chase and product change to it, which at this point is a great deal. For $450 a year, you get $300 in travel credits and airline incidental credits that can be used for a wide range of things. And that's a whole nother discussion for another day. But $300 in travel credits and an annual 85K free night certificate for $450 is just like a total bargain.
It totally is. That's just fantastic. So I'm excited about that. And, I think all of us are glancing around at our families saying, do we have any Chase consumer Marriott cards that ought to be upgraded? And also part of it though, is it also worth the headache to get more of them? Because there is the issue of, like, to get full value, you want to try to use up those $300 in airline incidental fee credits. And you also need to make sure you're really staying at a nice property each year to use those free night certificates. But if those two things line up for you, it's just, I think it's one of the best deals in credit cards today.
It is, and I think I've long said that the Hilton Aspire card is the best deal in consumer cards out there. And this now, I think, rivals it, because it's very easy to use an 85K free night certificate for excellent value, certainly more than whatever you figure the net cost is if you're able to use the full $300 in credits. And that's to say nothing of the Ritz's other benefits, like, priority pass with unlimited guests, and you can add authorized users to get their own priority pass, and that doesn't cost anything, and the best in class travel protections. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other reasons to like the card, but I think between the $300 annual travel credit and the 85K free night certificate, it would almost be hard not to get better value than the cost of the annual fee, unless you just don't try to use the $300 in credits and you blow your 85K free night certificate on a really low end hotel.
Right.
You'd almost have to work at it to get that bad of a deal.
Yeah, it's a terrific card. Meanwhile, just to sort of round out the changes here, the Bonvoy Brilliant, as Nick mentioned earlier, did go up in annual fee from $450 to $650, but they threw in some really sweet perks, like you get automatic platinum status, which means you get free breakfast at places like Ritz hotels. But you also
at St. Regis.
I meant St. Regis. Yeah,
right. That's what I
not at Ritz, specifically not at Ritz, and that's what I was to say is, unfortunately, with Marriott, the platinum elite status it's very hard to predict what benefits you're going to get at different Marriott hotels. That you need a whole chart to figure out what you're supposed to get based on the brand. And then there's a whole nother thing of like, well, what is the individual hotel actually delivering? So you may or may not get great value from that, but still at some places like St. Regis, I'll say it correctly this time, you can get really amazing value from platinum status alone. But that's not the only thing they added. They upped the free night certificate to 85K. They are now giving you 25 elite nights per year instead of 15, which since you're getting automatic platinum status won't actually matter to a lot of people. But for those who are trying to get a higher level status or trying to get, I don't know, a lifetime status, it might matter. And maybe that's it. But anyway, so whether or not it makes sense to pay $200 more is going to totally depend on each individual. But for some people, I think it's going to be totally worth it. For a lot of people, I think not, actually.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of sit on the fence on that one because it comes with 25 nights of elite credit, which if you also get a Marriott business card, then between those two cards, you'd be at 40 elite nights a year. You don't really need to be given platinum status probably at that point, because if you're not staying at least 10 nights a year in Marriott properties, which is what you would need to do to earn platinum status at that point, if you're not staying at least 10 nights a year, then what does platinum status mean to you? Probably,
right.
It's probably not
right.
very meaningful. So yeah, I feel like the automatic platinum status sounds nice on the surface, and I guess it is if you're not going to also get the business card or stay 25 nights a year. But I think it's not quite as strong as it sounds on the surface, since you're also getting those 25 elite nights. And then, beyond that, the free night certificate increasing in value is great, but the card used to come with a $300 Marriott credit each year, and now that's changed to a $25 monthly dining credit. And some people like that, I guess. But again, I feel like if you don't spend at least $300 a year in Marriott's, I'm not really sure why you would want a $450 or $650 card anyway. So I think it was, in my opinion, for most people who would consider the card, easier to use the annual $300 credit when it was a Marriott credit than it as a dining credit that is out, given out in dribs and drabs.
We're recording this near the end of September, and I just had a little panic of like, oh, I didn't use the September dining credit yet. I've got to go do that before the end of the month, and I don't need that kind of headache, right?
Right.
So
no, nobody does. Nobody does. I know some people are like, oh yeah, but I'll use it, easy breezy. And yes, you can. There are plenty of ways to do it. It's just, to me, less valuable than it was. So anyway, I'm not a huge fan of the changes to the Brilliant. It'll make sense for some folks, but not for plenty of others. But it's not quite as crazy as those $250 cards, the Bevy and the Bountiful, that I think are kind of nuts. And so that kind of segues us into,
go ahead,
I think, Mattress running the numbers, right? Because the question then becomes, if you're going to get the Bevy or the Bountiful, is it Bevy or Bountiful, the $250 cards, then you have to consider, well, should I spend for a free night certificate? Because now you can earn a free night certificate each year, but it requires $15,000 spend on that card. So you have to put $15,000 a year on the card and spend. The card does have some 4X categories. So the question becomes, if you get the Bevy or the Bountiful, should you spend your way to a free night certificate? What say you, Greg, the frequent miler?
Yeah. So, I mean, the free night certificates, they're worth, you can use them for hotels up to 50,000 points, or really up to 65,000 if you add 15,000 points of your own to the night. So, I don't value free night certificates as much as the equivalent number of points. Like, I don't value the certificate at 50,000 points because it's so much less flexible than points are, and it expires after a year. Yes, you can get it extended for another year by calling, but then that's the most. You can't get extended twice. But let's just, for the sake of argument, say a 50,000 point certificate is worth about the same as 40,000 points. In that case, you spend 15,000 points. $15,000 on the card. You earn 2 points per dollar for like all spend, but there's also some bonus categories. But let's just say you only get 2 points per dollar for that $15,000 spend. So that's what, 30,000 points plus the value of the cert. That's, 70,000 points. You're getting more than 4x on your spend for that first 15,000. So from that point of view, I actually think that's pretty good. Like if you're stuck with the card, you might as well go ahead and do that spend, I think. But where it gets a little depressing to me is when you compare it to other things. Like, so for example, the Hilton $95 card, you get with the same $15,000 spend, you get a free night that's can be used at a top of the line Hilton. There's no cap on that one. And
And you
this
get
one's
an annual
limited to
free night
50,000.
certificate on top of that, right? No, I'm sorry. You don't get an annual free night
You
on
don't.
that card. I apologize. No, I misspoke. Yeah. So comparing it to that is actually, I think, a solid comparison, because that one, like you said, can be used at basically any Hilton property in the world. There's a couple of exceptions, but they're like vacation club type condo properties that are a couple of exceptions. And there's like, I don't know, maybe a dozen of them. It's not very many places. Most of the really high-end Hiltons in the world, you can use your free night certificate. So I agree that free night certificate is potentially more valuable, though at the same time, in normal times, it's limited to weekend night use, whereas
That's right.
the Marriott certificate can be used any night of the week.
Yep.
My problem with the Marriott certificate and spending towards it is this. Now, I think that Greg's logic there actually makes a lot of sense. Picking a number of points that you kind of value the certificate at, I think that's a logical, reasonable way to look at it. However, I also look at it this way. So you've done a couple of studies now as to how much those 50K free night certificates are worth based on where you can use them. And Greg's done as much of a scientific method as one can do on this in terms of picking a number of cities and the higher rated properties, and they cost the right number of points to be able to use your certificate. And so what did you find the 50K free night certs were worth? Like around $300, if I remember correctly?
Yeah, that sounds about right. But that was before you could top them off. And I think with the ability to top off with points, that increases the value. So let me explain. So it was also back when they had award charts. So what was happening was the best properties were peak priced. And so the properties that standardly would be 50,000 were being priced at 60,000, I think it was. So I couldn't, in my sort of experiments and figuring out how much these things are worth, they couldn't be applied to the best properties. So instead, they were applied to the best properties that would normally cost 35,000 points, but were costing 40,000. But now that you could use them for 60,000 point properties by throwing in points, I think the value goes up higher than 300 is my expectation. I think you could probably expect to get around 400 on average. Like that wouldn't be a stretch at all, is my guess.
Yeah, and it's tough because hotel rates are particularly high right now. So that's easier to believe now probably than at any time in the past, even because prices are so high. But I look at it like, a 50K free night certificate is not quite as flexible as I want. Like, just this year I've been in like looking for rooms, rather in London and Paris and Rome. And I've had a hard time finding places where I could use those. And so I'm going to have to cough again. Hold on. Excuse me. Then the likeliness increases that you'll use it for a subpar redemption. And I think paying $250 a year and having to work at getting value out of the cert makes it more questionable.
That's the problem. I totally agree. That's why I was like, if you're stuck with it for some reason, then go ahead and do the spend. So like, for example, maybe you signed up just for the welcome bonus and you're planning on product changing it after a year. Great. Get the welcome bonus, do the spend, get another 50K cert, get a 50K cert. And then after a year, product change, see if you could product change to the Ritz if you got the Chase version of this. And if you got the Amex version, you probably could product change down to the $95 card, but we don't know yet what the product change options will be because this is too new. All right. The next question we have is with the Brilliant card. This is the now $650 card. It automatically gives you a 85K free night every year upon your anniversary. So upon, renewing the card. But it also gives you the ability to get a second one with $60,000 spend. So what do you think? Should you spend 60K on this card?
Oh man, I would have a hard time dedicating that much spend at a poor return on because you have to look at what it costs you to put that spend on this card, right? Because you could be using a card that earns 2% cash back, or presumably if you've got the ability to spend $60,000 a year on a card, I'm going to bet you probably could move assets to Bank of America and qualify for platinum honors and be able to get 2.625% cash back on that card. If you got capacity for that much spend, you probably have assets where you would be able to do that. And so look at it and say, well, that $60,000 spend could get you, a significant chunk of cash. And instead you're trading that for 2 Marriott points per dollar. And, that's a poor trade. So it's costing you something to put spend on that card in the first place. Now, if you're going to use your 85K free night cert at the St. Regis Bora Bora because you find availability where you can use the cert and top it off with points or something, it might certainly come out to be a good trade. But again, it really relies on finding a great use for the certificate. And I think the thing that we haven't mentioned about these free night certificates is that starting next year, the gloves are off in terms of Marriott's, no longer exist in award chart. Whereas this year, properties still had to remain within the bands that they historically had been priced at for the most part. Most Marriott properties had to be within a certain number of points of their previous award chart spots. Only some were able to increase by more. Starting next year, though, I think properties will more or less be able to charge whatever they want for awards. And so I think it's less certain that you'll get to be able to book those types of St. Regis Bora Bora type properties with your 85K cert. You may not have an opportunity to do that. Now, you'll still probably be able to get very good value, but again, you have to know that you're the type of person that's going to stay at those types of properties or seek them out, to make it worth it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And another way to think about it, even if you love your Marriott points, wouldn't you agree that 60,000 points is worth more than an 85K certificate because of how much more flexible it is? Okay. So if you agree with that, then think about this. $60,000 spend on this card gets you sort of 2 bunches of 60,000 points just from the spend, and then a certificate that's worth less than 60,000 points. You could alternatively, as you said before, if you had the Bank of America relationship, to get 2.62% cash back. Marriott regularly has sales on their points where they sell them for 0.9 cents each. I'm not going to try to do the math in my head right now, but I think that spending $60,000 on a 2.62% cash back card would give you enough or close to enough to buy 60,000 times 3, basically. So you're getting more value. You're getting points that don't have to be spent within a year. It's not limited to, the way certificates are limited. So if you love
and it doesn't
Marriott,
have to be points, they could be cash, or you could end up using that cash on something else. You just use it
in many
on the
other
points
ways
if the points are worth it.
Yeah, but my point is even if you're all Marriott all the time, I don't think it makes sense.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to, and with no other benefits for big spend, right? That's it. It doesn't get you closer to a higher level of status. There's no spend your way to titanium, right? So I don't feel like there's anything there worthwhile. I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, we were expecting a spend your way to titanium, and then I think I would have maybe had a different argument. We'll see. Well, we'll never see.
We'll never see. Yeah, we won't see.
All right, we've got another new segment this week, just for this week, a special segment, which is a pop quiz for Nick.
Woo!
And
pop quiz.
Nick has no idea what the quiz is about, but I'm going to give you sort of 2 mini quizzes here. The first one I expect you to ace no problem at all, but it's sort of to give you an understanding of what the second one means. So quiz number 1, rank the following words from least to most premium. Okay, I have some words that I've put in alphabetical order.
I have an idea.
Diamond, gold, platinum, silver. All right. Now rank them from least to most premium.
Oh my goodness. So silver would be the least.
Mhm.
Gold is probably the next. Now, diamond and platinum is where it gets a little confusing, right? Because platinum is going to be higher than silver and gold, but which is higher, diamond or platinum? I'm going to go with diamond. I think that by weight, diamond is worth more. So diamond at the top.
There you go. All right. Yeah. So, and that's a common categorization for like elite levels, for example. And Nick has that right. All right. Now, another collection of words. This is the second part of the quiz. Ready?
Yes.
Pay attention. Bevy, bold, boundless, bountiful, brilliant. Now rank those from least to most premium.
Nobody knows. It's a mystery. There is
But there is a
nothing
right answer
premium about
here
it. What
because
there is,
because
you're
we're
right.
using Marriott's annual fees as the definition
Right.
of premiumness. So
So
go.
it's boundless at the bottom and then bevy and bountiful in the middle.
I'm
Oh,
sorry,
it's
you
not bound.
already got it
Bold,
wrong.
bold at the bottom,
Bold
bold
is
at the
at the
bottom.
bottom.
I forget about the bold card. Bold, boundless, bevy, bountiful, brilliant, all the way at the top, which is not
Very good.
brilliant at all.
Very good. And just as I said, Bevy and Bountiful are equal. They're both
Right.
$250, but very good. All right.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that was
There's
that was
I
the
don't
pop
get
quiz.
it. I don't get it. And the thing I didn't mention earlier, but that really confused me about those mid-tier cards is I feel like they're totally missing their target market. I feel like the target market for the
Yeah.
$250 cards is people that were okay with spending $95 on a card and might be willing to spend more, but weren't already willing to spend $450, right? That's why they came out with a $250 card and bumped up the $450 card to get some more money out of the folks who are already willing to pay for that. So those people who were willing to pay 95, but also have enough money to pay more, but not quite 450, are those people really going to want to spend an extra $155 and not get an annual free night certificate? I just don't get
It
who
it
they thought
doesn't
they were
make any
getting there.
sense at all.
Or the business
Yeah.
traveler that doesn't really follow these things and is just going to get a Marriott card because, hey, I stay at a bunch of Marriotts. Again, you tell them, okay, well, there's a $95 card that comes with an annual free night certificate or a $250 card that you have to spend $15,000 on and work to use the free night certificate. I just don't get who they're
Right.
marketing to or why they thought that was a good
Yeah.
idea. I don't
Yeah.
understand.
No, I totally agree. Totally agree.
Yeah.
It's
Anyway,
it's befuddling. All
befuddling,
right.
befuddling. All right. So that brings us, I think, to the main event, right?
Main event time. Absolutely. So we are going to sort of do a recap in a way of our three cards, three continents challenge, except that really, if you want to learn about what our trips were like, you need to go over to the blog, go to frequentmiler.com, look at we each did a recap post where we talked about all of our travels. Go there, read through that because it's pretty amazing and there's just no way we can do justice to it here. But also go over to Instagram and go to Frequent Miler on Instagram, go to our profile, and there's little cartoon pictures of each of us on that profile. If you click it, you'll see all the stories that were pinned all along that sort of do a video version of our travels in a way, and it's a lot of fun watching those as well. So what I want to do rather than recap exactly what we did on our travels, I want to talk about how we used our credit cards that we had picked. So if you remember, we did a draft where we each could pick 3 credit cards, and we got the sign up bonuses for those. And Nick and I are going to talk about, what was our strategy with each of our cards, basically.
Yeah. So we'll go over all 3 cards. Is that what you're saying in the
Yeah.
strategy?
Yeah.
So the 3 cards that I chose were the Schwab Platinum card, the Capital One Venture card, and the Barclays Aviator Business card. And so I picked those 3 cards for pretty specific reasons. I knew that both Amex and Capital One would transfer to Air Canada Aeroplan, which was going to be part of my strategy. Now, originally, I thought I might use some of the Capital One points differently. I may have picked a different second card if not for the fact that I had some other ideas in mind. But in the end, Aeroplan ended up being a big part of my strategy. So I picked 2 cards cards that do transfer to Aeroplan, and I picked the Barclays Aviator card because I wanted to take advantage of one specific American Airlines sweet spot, and that's flying between the Middle East and Asia in business class for 40,000 points. And then later on, it just happened to work out that I found other things to do with American Airlines miles that really enhanced my trip. So I was pretty excited to have those three cards and their associated bonuses.
Great. And I imagine you used some of your, was it your Schwab points that you used for cash back as well?
That's true. So yeah, because the
Mhm.
Schwab version of the Platinum card enables you to cash out points at a value of 1.1 cent each. That's part of the reason I selected that card, because it would give me the ability to turn some of those points into cash at an even better rate than what I could do with Capital One points. And the advantage there is, so Capital One's miles, you can transfer to partners or you can use them to cover travel charges at a value of 1 cent each, but only whatever they consider travel charges. The nice thing with the Schwab card is you can turn it into cash at a value of 1.1 cents each. And so then the cash you can use for anything. It doesn't have to be only travel expenses or only things that will code as travel expenses. You don't have to worry about whether or not it will, and you get even more value. So that was a big part of the reason why I took that card, because I knew I would need some more cash in my budget.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So for me, I had the Amex Gold card with a 90,000 point bonus. I had the Marriott Bonvoy card that at the time had 5 free nights as its bonus. And I had the City Premier card with an 80,000 point bonus, which is still going on as we speak. The Amex Gold card was my treasure trove for being able to book the ANA Round the World Award. So I was able to transfer. I knew I could transfer those points to ANA, which is what I did. And ANA, we've talked a million times about how great of a award chart it has for round the world business class awards for booking Star Alliance carriers. So that's what I did with that one. And the Marriott card, I had picked that specifically because I knew I wanted a luxury trip. I wanted to be not just flying in business class, but staying in nice hotels and really just kind of enjoying a trip the way I think of as like a great, international trip would be, which to me, I like some luxury. So I did that and got 6 free nights in hotels out of that, because it also earned points as well. My third card, the Premier card, that was my jack of all trades. So I used that to transfer to Avios, which were used to plug holes in my round the world itinerary. And I used it to book some Nordic choice hotel nights when I was in Norway. And because those points transfer 1 to 2 to choice. So that was an incredible deal. And I also used it for cash back. So that was my just jack of all trades single credit card there, which brings me
go ahead. Yep.
Right to, well, I was going to say the next question we had in the outline is, what was your MVP card, like the most valuable player card? And so technically from the amount of like travel I got, probably the gold card with the ANA around the world, but the Marriott card was a close second. But as far as like what I actually turned to, I felt like I could not have built the trip without the Premier card. It was, it's like having a baseball player who can pitch and hit and play shortstop. It's
Right.
It did everything for me.
Yeah,
How
I
about
mean,
you?
I think that's worth hammering for a second, because
Yeah.
again, so Greg booked flights, hotel, and got cash back all in
Right.
one bonus with the Premier card. And when we say he booked flights, it wasn't exactly short flights either, right? I mean, you flew quite a
No, right.
ways in Qatar Airways business class, and you stayed at a relatively expensive, and maybe not incredibly expensive, but a decently pricey anyway, Choice Privileges property, right, in Norway. So
Yeah,
I think,
we stayed 2 nights for only 12,000 city points because they transfer 1 to 2 to choice. So it cost me for 2 nights 24,000 choice points, but only 12,000 city points.
Yeah,
So that was amazing.
Yeah, hotels in in Norway and Scandinavia in general are very expensive. So I mean, when you look at the value you got out of that, that's pretty incredible. Flight, hotel, and still had some left to get cash back. I think that's really interesting on a card that we don't really talk about all that much, right? It doesn't get all that much attention. But
yeah, it really did. It made me really high on the card. The flexibility of what you can do with it is really astounding.
Yeah. For me, it's hard because my trip was accounted for, in ways to use all of the points that I had. But I think really, if you look at it, that the Amex Platinum card would, in ordinary circumstances, be the standout MVP, because just on that one bonus, I could have booked that entire Aeroplan one way. I did a 6-country, 5-airline one-way award over the course of 5 days via Air Canada Aeroplan that cost me 105,000 points. And the bonus, of course, the welcome bonus on the Schwab Platinum is 100,000 points, but it requires $6,000 in spend. So after doing the minimum spend requirement, you'd have 106,000 points. So that one single bonus could have booked that entire 5-day business class itinerary where I visited 6 different countries. So I feel like that is the MVP in the sense that, it could have booked the most valuable part of my trip on its own. It didn't, in the way I accounted for things in order to use all of the points that I had to maximum advantage. I cashed out points from the Schwab card, so I didn't exactly use it that way. But when I look at which piece of my puzzle could have created the most value, I think that's it.
That totally makes sense. All right, very good. Now we're going to move into what our favorite moments from the challenge were, but we're going to do it in a different way, which is we're going to talk about were our favorite moments of each other's trips before talking about our own. And here are the rules. Each of us get to pick up to 4 favorite moments for each of our challengers' trips, but can only pick 1 favorite moment from our own trip. Okay.
Okay.
And we got Steven's answers to these in advance. So why don't we start with Steven's answers, and then we'll roll into ours. Okay.
Good call.
All right. So Steven starts with Nick's trip. His favorite parts of Nick's were seeing how much Nick enjoyed the pyramids. He was surprised when he went last year, like how much he loved seeing the pyramids in Egypt. And so he really enjoyed seeing you also fall in love with them.
Yeah, I think that's really cool and interesting and funny because I think he didn't expect to enjoy them that much, it sounds like. And it's interesting how those things happen to you when you travel a lot, right? There are places that you don't expect to really wow you that do, or even you mentioned with Niagara Falls that it's a place you'd been to before, but it still kind of smacked you and said, wow, this is really gorgeous. And I think that happens sometimes when you travel, even the places you don't expect turn out to be great.
Absolutely. And his other favorites from your trip were Northern Lights and swimming with whale sharks. You kind of did it all.
Crowd pleasers. Those are crowd pleaser stops, right? I mean, yeah. Well, I'm glad he enjoyed them because I certainly did too. So
they were amazing. All right. And then for my trip, he picked Norway. He said, everything I've seen from there looks so beautiful. And yes, Steven, it was absolutely spectacular. Then the other thing he picked from my trip was eating a live worm. He said, I don't think I could bring myself to do that. As an aside, I know people listening to this might not know about that. There was a bar.
Greg hopes that you didn't know about that when you went to both. That's what he's hoping.
There was a bar in Saigon where they had a special menu, and one of the things on the special menu were these coconut worms, which you could do these worm shots with them, and you can eat them different ways. Usually they're cooked, but I did the advanced version. I was a few drinks in, and it looked like fun and a good Instagram opportunity, and It tasted like it sincerely these are coconut orange. They live in coconuts. It sincerely tasted like coconut. So his other
apart from the
favorite from
part where it where it moved in your mouth, that part was probably a little bit different.
no, it was dead by the time I bit into it. Um, his other favorite from my trip was being able to book Qatar Airways for 6,000 points. So what that's about is I had found this incredible deal, which was the ability to fly from Doha to Sofia, Bulgaria, for in business class for only 6,000 avios, which is just, I mean, you can't fly economy anywhere near that cheap on that route. So it seems like it was some kind of mistake that I stumbled onto, but Stephen points that out as one of his favorites, and it was one of my favorite things too when I was booking it. Believe me.
Yeah, that was an amazing deal. Incredible find. I mean, it's nice. It's exciting when you find those types of things, right?
Oh my gosh, it's so exciting. And then when it actually booked successfully, right. I was afraid that it wouldn't really ticket, but it did. And we flew it. So yeah, it worked. And his favorite moment from his own trip was getting to fly the world's shortest flight in both directions. So he flew a flight that took about 90 seconds. And so he had his theme for his trip was world records. And so he did the world's shortest flight and also later followed up with the world's longest flight. So there you go from Stephen.
Very good. Okay.
Do you want to?
Yeah. I'll go next.
Do your list next. Yeah.
Okay. So my favorite moment from Greg's trip was the one where he went over budget.
Which I did. I totally did.
I'm just kidding. Not my favorite moment, but a good opportunity for comedy. No, so I liked, obviously Norway was gorgeous. But to me, I actually was really intrigued. I'm going to tell you, with your Istanbul stop, I think was really intriguing. Not so much while it was happening, but the reels I saw afterwards from specifically from Maisie, because Maisie put together some fantastic footage of your time in Istanbul. And I've watched some of those like multiple times because it just looks really cool. It looks like you guys had a lot of fun and ate a lot of interesting stuff, and the footage from the markets and things I thought looked really intriguing. And I felt like I had stopped in Istanbul. My stop was very short. Your stop was obviously longer. And I think you took more advantage of it than I did on my stop. And I saw a bunch of that footage and said, wow, I really need to get back to Istanbul and see more of it, because it seemed like you guys had a great time there.
Yeah, I mean, Istanbul was a ton of fun and absolutely delicious. So we had 2 nights there. So yeah, we really were able to see quite a lot in that time, which, for those listening, you might not think 2 nights is very much when you're traveling internationally, but on these trips, 2 nights was a luxury.
Yeah, for sure. And another thing that I really enjoyed, and this is silly and it's small, but it was something I really enjoyed, was your reel you did about the slippers. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you got to go to Frequent Miler and go through the reels, because it was comedy gold and very entertaining. And I think that a big piece of doing a trip like this was coming up with some stuff that was kind of entertaining about travel. And if you haven't seen the clip, I won't ruin the whole thing for you, but I think that if you travel a lot, you'll kind of relate in some way, whether the slippers thing is your thing or something else. There'll be some way you'll relate to it. And I felt like the way you delivered it was just so funny. I thought it was fantastic.
Thanks a lot. That was really fun doing that too.
I watched that one multiple times too, I've got to admit. And I laughed out loud multiple times while watching it. So. That was a lot of fun too. I mean, your whole trip was really good. And so there were a lot of different highlights I could pick out. I mentioned on our Ask Us Anything this week that I was really intrigued with this trip because I have wanted to go to the places he went to for a long time and haven't spent much time in most of them. So that, right off the bat made me intrigued, because I didn't expect you were going to go to the places you did. And even after your trip started, I was like texting my family with what I thought you were going to do next. And I was wrong almost every time. So, so I think that, there was a lot of surprise there, and that made it a lot of fun too. So those are some highlights from Greg. From Stephen, and I'm going to steal one that I know Greg probably wanted to use, but the reel that Steven did about relaxing, the one where he kind of roasted us because we were both kind of go, go, go in the beginning. And he took some time to just kick back and relax and enjoy. And he said, Greg and Nick, you can, on a dream trip, you can relax some too. And when he put the cucumbers on his eyes and he kicked back, like the look on his face when he delivered the line, I was like, oh my goodness, that is just so classic. I don't know. I had this classic British comedy in my mind where I was like, oh my goodness, that was so well delivered. So
it really was. I absolutely love that moment, and I watched that one a number of times too. It was so much fun, and what a great way to poke at us in jest and really enjoy himself. So that was
yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean,
totally
that competitiveness and, like a little poke here and there back and forth, I think made the trip more fun too, because I was constantly looking for updates from you guys, in the very early days, maybe not as much as when some of that stuff started happening. Then I was just constantly looking to see, okay, well, what are they going to do next? And, and in which way might they call me out, and what do I need to do in response? And so I think that was a fun aspect of the trip that got played up. So I thought he played into that quite well. So I enjoyed that very much. I also really enjoyed the fact that he took maximum advantage of the things to do at the Singapore airport. And I said on our Ask Us Anything this week that I have often heard that Singapore has, the world's best airport, and there's so many things to do in the airport and blah, blah, blah. And so I've been aware that there are things to do, but because I usually use airline miles, I'm usually flying business or first class. So I've spent a good deal of time in the Singapore airport over the years, but all of it has been in lounges, basically. I've seen very little of Singapore airport because I've usually been in a lounge somewhere. And so Steven's coverage there and his videos from that really, really intrigued me, because I said, I got to get out of these lounges some and see some of these things. And of course, because I travel with kids now, a lot of the stuff he did, I thought, oh, that'd be a blast with my kids. So I really enjoyed that he did those things. He got there early enough to make sure that he could do them before they closed. And talk about how they work and whatnot. So, and I also love the fact that he gave up the secret to solving mazes, not because I read it. I actually skipped it. He had a spoiler alert in his post because he said there's a secret to getting your way out of a maze. And I skipped it. I didn't read it. But the reason I appreciate it is because my wife did read it. And she is relieved now that if she's ever in a maze and feels lost, she knows how to get out. So I thought that was a fantastic tip. So thank you very much for that, Stephen Pepper.
All right, very good. So now we're up to, what was the one, you can only pick one, favorite moment of your own trip?
I think that people will probably not expect me to pick this one. Maybe some will, but I think the highlight for me was snorkeling. I think snorkeling in Oman, because it was so surprising to me. I never in a million years even had in my mind that you could snorkel or would want to snorkel anywhere in the Middle East, because I just don't picture snorkeling. And it's silly that I didn't, because there's a lot of water there. And so I don't know why it didn't occur to me that there are probably some tropical fish living in the warm, shallow waters around that area, and various things to see, but it just didn't dawn on me because it's not something I associate with that region. So I think my favorite thing was being surprised by that and getting in the water. And there's just something I love about snorkeling. It's a very peaceful activity. You don't hear anything except your own breathing, basically, and you can watch these sea creatures. And so, obviously the whale sharks were amazing. They were huge. They passed right by us. And, when we first saw them going by the boats, it was really exciting because they were right at the surface. And so you could see them really well. And we went to get in the water, and the guide said, all right, we're going to get in the water, but don't swim towards them. You don't need to. Trust me, they'll swim towards you. And I didn't know if I really believed that up front, because I've known people who've snorkeled with whale sharks, and the pictures and video I've seen have always been pretty far away, unless they were scuba diving. And I was amazed when these things just kept coming right by us. And they told us to keep 3 meters distance from them. And, at some point, one came up behind me. You can see in the videos on Instagram. Instagram, and I didn't realize it was there. And when I turned, when I heard somebody say something or sensed it or whatever, and I turned, my leg actually hit it. That's how close the whale shark came to me. So I didn't expect that at all when I booked Oman as a stop. I didn't expect that.
And
So
did these sharks know that you were not food?
well, yes. I mean, my kids were very concerned about that, but then my wife educated them that whale sharks eat plankton. They don't eat people. So, they're basically plant eaters. So they're not, they're filter feeders. So they don't chew up people.
There's a coconut worm whose parents told it that people don't eat worms.
And they were wrong. Right. Good point. But they didn't seem interested in eating me, especially that one, because it did come up right behind me and go right past me. And the other people there was another couple on my snorkeling tour, and they said it was amazing because it was coming right at me. And then like at the last minute, they said it turned and just kind of went around me. Like, I was in the way.
Yeah.
Went around me.
All right. Well, I have to now jump in so I'm going to start with your trip. Because that was one of the first things I saw from your trip, and I was like instantly jealous because I love snorkeling with sea creatures. I've never snorkeled with anything like a whale or a shark, let alone a whale shark or shark whale or whatever these things are. So I was super jealous of that. And of course, the sea turtles, I have snorkeled around sea turtles, but I love that experience. So I was insanely jealous about that. And it kind of hurt too, because Oman was one of the places I had actually seriously looked at going to on this trip. Not because I knew anything really about Oman, but because I had researched like all of the best Marriott hotels where I could spend these $50K free night certificates, and the Ritz in Oman just looked spectacular.
It does look spectacular.
I get great reviews. So I was going to try to get to there almost solely because of that hotel. And when I saw that video, I was like, oh man, I should have done that.
And like it pained me so much not to be able to stay there, because it was only like 40,000 points during the day that I was there, and it was on Fine Hotels and Resorts for $300 plus tax, so it came into 378 or 368, I think. And it is in a former palace. I mean, it looks amazing. So it pained me not to be able to stay at that property. If I go back, I definitely have to try that one out. But yeah, I mean, I was really shocked at how clear the water was. I mean, it was just, the visibility was amazing there. So I look forward to going back.
Yeah. So jealous of that one. The other thing another favorite moment of mine is not one you'd predict, which is seeing you on an Egypt Air flight that actually looked nice. So this was a nice surprise to me, because I think I had actively not looked at Egypt Air as an option when I was looking at flights, because everything I had read in the past was very negative about them, and the seats didn't look very comfortable, and just all kinds of reasons. But I know your review, it wasn't like it was a glowing, like a great experience, but the seats were very nice, and I totally would do it if I could get on on one of those airplanes. I can't remember, was
787. Yeah. 787. Yeah. I mean, I had this image in my mind because I'd read, reviews of people smoking on the flights and the service being horrible. And like that wasn't at all the experience I had.
Right.
And like you said, the seats were much nicer than what I imagined.
Yeah. My favorite moment overall of Nick's trip was when he went to the North Pole, sort of.
That was so much fun.
And used my own words sort of against me, where in one of these shows I said, we're not going to define continents, like, we're not going to be sticklers. We're going to, if someone goes to the North Pole and sees Santa, totally give them credit for that continent. And so of course Nick had to make it a mission to go do exactly that. So loved that. And your whole little video of making a a letter to me from the North Pole. It was gold, absolute gold.
It was so much fun doing that. And so I had a little difficulty because I changed plans a couple of times, and at some point I had an award booked there, and then I switched it to book it a different way. And the short version of the story is I was struggling for a little bit to connect some dots that I wanted to on the trip. And at some point my wife was like, well, why don't you just cut out the North Pole? And I was like, no, absolutely not. That has to be my last stop. So
Right.
there's no way I'm cutting it out. It's just a matter of figuring out which way I'm going to do it, because I was trying to really figure out how I was going to get back home. That was really the big piece that I had to resolve, was how I'm going to get back home, because there are a variety of different ways to do it. But I was having trouble finding the availability that I needed. And so that's why I ended up switching things around the way I did. But at any rate, there was no way that stop was going to not be there, because I was so excited about that.
I love that. And up to that point, I mean, actually including that point, I was still thinking my trip was just as good in many ways, as far as like the types of things I saw and did, but more luxurious, and more fine dining. You got in some, which was really nice. And then that gets me to my final one for next favorite moment. Then he goes and takes pictures of the Northern Lights, and him standing there with the incredible Northern Lights behind him. And that's when I just like gave up. It's just like, oh man, he did it. I don't have a chance anymore. That's it.
It was very lucky. It was very, very lucky, because you can't see him every night of the week necessarily, or every night of the year. So, and I knew that going in, and I initially nobody else was booked on the tour. There were a whole bunch of things that could have gone wrong. And then when they picked me up, so I landed at the airport, and actually it was I went later that day that I arrived. And so I had just been there for a few hours. And so when we got in the van to go and check this out, the other people in the van all were commenting on how great the sunset was. And they said, this is so clear. We haven't been able to see the sunset for the last like 3, 4, 5 days. They said it'd just been raining and cloudy, and so they couldn't see anything. So there was no way to go out and see the Northern Lights because it was too overcast. So they were like, this is the first night like all week that they've been able to actually go out and do it. And
that is so lucky
that was the night I was there and the night I picked to do it. So I was very, very fortunate that it all came together and happened and worked.
Fantastic. So that was my picks for Nick's trip.
So your trip. Oh no, Steven's trip.
Well, no, I mean, so for Steven's trip, I have to give him props for flying Norse Atlantic Airways. I'd never even heard of that.
Me either,
it's a new low-cost carrier, and so I thought that was cool right out of the gate. And then following that with another thing I'd never heard of, the world's shortest flight, that 90-second thing. That sort of 1-2 punch I thought was awesome. And then my third thing from Steven's trip, same one you mentioned, when he kicked back in Cairo, kicking it back in Cairo, and basically trolling us with, hey guys, you can relax. on a great trip can include relaxation. I love that.
Yeah.
My single favorite moment from my entire trip was, this was really hard to pick because there's so many great moments, but was rolling into Bergen, Norway. No idea what to expect. I just thought of it as a place where I could go from there to the fjords, which was really my goal. And I just fell in love. It's like love at first sight. Absolutely loved everything about that town. It's beautiful. It's super friendly. If you're into outdoor stuff, like you can hike up a mountain right next to town. It just had it all, and it has fantastic food. I'm in love with the town, and I'm already working to book another visit to bring my wife back. So that was my Yeah, that was
Yeah, I
it.
mean that was a great moment, and a place that I had once been on a train going to, and turned around and went back because the weather was so bad, and I regretted it after I saw everything you did there, and I
Yeah.
thought, oh man, I wish I had at least tried, because I mean the scenery. If you haven't seen the Instagram reels yet, you really have to go and check out Greg's story and all the reels on the Frequent Miler page, because it's breathtakingly beautiful. I mean, I think that, yeah, and I come from a place of having seen a few beautiful places in my time, and it's wow kind of beautiful. So you really have to take a look at that, because it's incredible scenery, and I knew Stephen had already picked that as a favorite moment. That's why I didn't repeat it and when I was picking mine from your trip, but that absolutely was an amazing thing when you were at the top of that, whatever it was. You said it wasn't even
The,
that high, but it looked high.
the funicular.
Funicular.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't take that long to get up there by the funicular, and walking down took maybe half an hour. But it was absolutely breathtaking views from up there. I didn't expect it. You're going up a funicular that doesn't seem like it's going that far, but and that you could get to the funicular, like it's like 2 blocks away from the hotel. it's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
right in town. It's just amazing. All right.
Something.
Well,
Wait, let me hop into one other thing that I should have mentioned before, and that's that I think one of my other favorite things about your trip was the fact that you had Maisie with you, the culinary concierge, and I think that that was obviously good for obviously for the food stuff that she brought to the table. No pun intended, because obviously she had the knowledge and the connections to make the food end of it happen. And I think that's very appealing to a lot of people. But I think for me, what made it most interesting was the knowledge that Maisie probably wasn't really into miles and points before. And so watching her reactions to the trip, and also that one time where you kind of interviewed her and asked her about how it all unfolded in the email that she got from you explaining it, and just thinking about what that must have been like as someone who is kind of new to this world. I think that brought something really interesting to the trip, and was one of my favorite pieces. I think that idea of bringing someone who's not familiar with our world of miles and points on a crazy miles and points trip, there's a level of excitement to that I think anybody who's into miles and points could enjoy, regardless of the food scene part of it, and the food scene part of it obviously added tremendously.
yeah,
So
yeah. And in addition to what you just said about the benefits of bringing her, and how it gave a fresh perspective, another part that's sort of fresh to me is, I'm so used to being able to travel the world with at any time I want kind of thing, that when we were talking about things like Doha, in my mind, I'm just like, oh, let's just stay in the Great Lounge. We're only there for, I don't know, 8 hours or whatever it is. But she's like, no, we're in a part of the world I never seen before and probably never will again. So we have to get out and do stuff. And so that influence, she really pushed me to do things that I wouldn't have done.
mhm.
And it was all for the better. I mean, we had
Yeah.
great experiences thanks to that. And, I hope that I'll retain some of that when I'm not traveling with her. Just kind of remember that,
Yeah.
that all these things are special. And if you're not, it's fine to relax sometimes. Absolutely. But,
Sure.
to remember that there are amazing things just about everywhere. And so it's worth getting out of your sort of comfort zone, and seeking them out.
Yep. Absolutely. Agreed. All right, yeah. I mean, I think that gives at least somewhat of an overview, right, of the incredible things that you can look for, and there's so much more. So,
Yeah.
like Greg said, you want to
So
get to
much
the
more.
blog and take a look, and into the Instagram. I feel like Instagram, is a fun way to actually watch the trip, and so the blog will give you a sense of what happened and how much we spent and how it all worked. If you're interested in the numbers and getting a full summary of it, but I feel like Instagram is the more entertaining way to watch it, because you kind of, I don't know,
Totally
feel like
agree.
you're on the trip. I felt like I was on the trip with you while I was watching the Instagram footage, and so I think that's an exciting way to go about looking at this.
Totally agree.
So, all
All
right. So
right.
we had a discussion question that I think you skipped over here. So I want to just ask you real
Yeah.
quick. No? No,
Okay.
you want to skip over?
Well, I was wanting to wrap it up, but if you want to do it really quick.
Yeah, and I don't have an answer for it. So if you do, then hopefully that'll be good. So what would you change for future challenges? I thought that was a good question. What would you change on a future challenge from what we did this time around?
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier how much fun it was when we did some back and forth during the travels, like where we kind of like teased each other and everything. And so I would love for future challenges to explicitly include more interaction between us. Like, let's bake that into the challenge from the get-go, that we somehow interact during our travels, and give us more opportunity to do that, not just over Instagram, but hopefully in person.
Face to face. I agree. I think that'll be a lot
Yeah.
of fun. Very good. All right. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time for this week. So if you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to get more of our posts in your email inbox, you want to go to frequentmiler.com/subscribe. Again, that's frequentmiler.com/subscribe to join our email list. You can follow us on Twitter, certainly on Instagram, where you can see all this great footage that we've been talking about. You can join our Frequent Miler Insiders Facebook group, where we have lots of constant discussion and readers answer each other's questions about all this award booking stuff. So please come check us out in all those places, and wherever you're listening to this show or watching this show, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, enable notifications, leave us a comment. We always appreciate your feedback. Speaking of feedback, if you have specific feedback or questions or comments, you can send them to
mailbag@frequentmiler.com.
And we will see you guys again next week.
Bye, everybody.